Hello everybody, it's Non-Scene News here, and today we've gotten a lot of breaking dates today. And the first news we'll be talking about today is coming from the Russian Federation. So if you guys remembered in the previous video, or a couple of days ago now, the Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed to resume direct negotiations without any preconditions with Ukraine, starting on May the 15th in Istanbul. So according to Vladimir Putin, the President of the Russian Federation, those who truly seek peace cannot ignore Russia's proposal for negotiations. Russian President Vladimir Putin emphasized. He also noted that Russia is ready for serious talks with Ukraine aimed at addressing the root causes of the conflict. So after Vladimir Putin made his statements about direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, he phoned up the president of Turkey, Erdogan. So Erdogan, the president of Turkey, and Vladimir Putin held a phone conversation that lasted a couple of hours, the Turkish presidential administration reported. So Erdogan, again the president of Turkey, told Putin about Turkey's readiness to host negotiations between Russia and Ukraine in the key city of Istanbul, which was previously the host site of the 2022 negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. The Turkish president also stated that a window of opportunity had opened for resolving the conflict in Ukraine. But it seems that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, took it a step further. He stated that he will be personally attending the meeting between Russia and Ukraine, but he says that he will only do it if Vladimir Putin shows up. So according to Zelensky, I will be in Turkey this Thursday, May the 15th, and I will be waiting for Putin in Turkey. Personally, we are ready to talk to end the war. So after Zelensky made that comment, he eventually arrived in Istanbul. So you can see here in the bottom left corner, Zelensky stated that I am here for Putin, and I think this is a very clear message. But obviously, Vladimir Putin did not eventually show up, and Volodymyr Zelensky actually ended up meeting the president of Turkey, Erdogan, and held a meeting with him for a couple of hours, and eventually left for the Coalition of the Willing meeting in Albania, which we will get into next video. But let's just focus about the Ukrainian and Russian delegation meeting. So after Zelensky left, Putin's delegation arrived in Istanbul for talks with Ukraine. So we'll quickly go over who was in the Russian delegation for the Istanbul negotiations with Ukraine. So Vladimir Medensky was leading the team of the Russian delegation. He was previously the chief negotiator back in 2022 before the Russian and Ukrainian negotiations eventually and famously crumbled down. So the leader of the delegation is Vladimir Medensky. Again, he was the chief negotiator back in 2022. Accompanying Vladimir Medensky is the deputy foreign minister of the Russian Federation, the military intelligence chief, and the deputy defense minister. And also, obviously, the Ukrainian delegation met with the Russian delegation. The Ukrainian delegation that met the Russian representatives in Istanbul on May the 15th, 2025, was led by Umerov, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, the head of the presidential office, and also the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andriy. So, very big news. So, obviously, Ukraine sent some pretty big names to Istanbul. The Defense Minister of Ukraine, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and even the head of the presidential office. According to Zelensky, before he left, Zelensky believes that the Russian delegation that arrived for the talks are not authorized to make decisions. According to Zelensky, we all know who makes decisions. in Russia. But eventually the Russian and Ukrainian Istanbul negotiations started, so I'll quickly go over the key news that came out of the Russian delegation meeting between Vladimir Medensky and the Ukrainian delegation. So apparently Ukraine and Russia both agreed to a potential 1,000 for 1,000 prisoner swap. So the both countries have agreed to swap 1,000 prisoners. Ukraine requested a meeting of heads of state. Russia took a note of this. Ukraine obviously wants Zelensky and Putin to meet up and discuss ending the war in Ukraine. Both sides agreed to develop and exchange detailed ceasefire proposals in the upcoming discussions, and Russia expressed willingness to maintain negotiation channels, with talks now concluded for this round. So the meetings between Russia and Ukraine only lasted a couple of hours, 2 hours, and eventually they both sides agreed to pick up tomorrow. So very interesting news. So according to official Ukrainian sources, the resumption of Russian and Ukrainian talks on Friday is possible, but not yet planned. So an official date hasn't been officially noted, but a lot of sources stated that it might be tomorrow. And that's practically it regarding the Russian and Ukrainian negotiations in Istanbul. And obviously, if you do want to be updated on this, please consider subscribing and liking, and I'll try and keep you updated on the next round of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. And furthermore, the next news we've got today is coming back from Russia, where we've just got some breaking news today that Vladimir Putin has just dismissed the Russian Ground Forces Chief, Salyukov, and appointed him to the Security Council role. So Colonel General Oleg Salyukov, who headed the Russia's ground forces, has just been dismissed from his post, according to a decree signed by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. So Salyukov has been appointed as a Deputy Secretary of the Russian Security Council. The Kremlin has not yet announced who will replace Salyukov as the head of the ground forces, but the only news we've gotten right now is that Salyukov has just been dismissed as the Russian Ground Forces Chief, so very interesting news. And furthermore, the next news we've got today is coming from Ukraine, where we've got news that the newly elected Pope Leo XIV, will officially visit Ukraine in the near future. So Pope Leo XIV recently announced his visit to Ukraine after he advocated for a ceasefire and peace in Ukraine. I should add, actually, previously, the previous Pope, Pope Francis, actually never ended up visiting Ukraine, but Pope Leo, the newly elected Pope, will be visiting Ukraine. And again, he actually announced his intention to visit after he actually had a phone conversation with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. So very interesting news. And furthermore, we've also gotten some breaking news today coming from Ukraine and Hungary. We've officially gotten some news today that Hungary has reportedly shot down 2 Ukrainian reconnaissance drones over the town of Tokai in northern western Hungary. So this exact village here. So according to information we've gotten, Hungary has actually apparently shot down 2 Ukrainian reconnaissance drones over the town of Tokai of Hungary. So, according to the news we've gotten, Hungary has declared a state of an emergency after the incident in which 2 Ukrainian drones were shot down. So, the two countries of Hungary and Ukraine are experiencing some pretty big turbulences in relations. And furthermore, the next news we've got today is coming from the EU. So, we've got news that the EU approves the 17th package of sanctions against Russia. So, the Financial Times claims that the measures will affect over 149 oil tankers that the EU believes are linked to Russia's secret fleet. So the restrictions will also apply to companies from third countries, including the UAE, Turkey, Serbia, Vietnam, and Uzbekistan, which are suspected of helping Russia evade sanctions. So, according to Eurativ, the news agency here in your bottom left corner, the package is, according to Eurativ, relatively weak, which is why it was supported by Hungary and Slovakia, who had been blocking previous versions. The next news we want today is coming from Israel and Hamas. So, we've officially got some news today that Hamas has freed the Israeli-American hostage, Eden Alexander. He was captured in 2023 while serving voluntarily with the Israeli army. So, we can see here in your bottom left corner the first image of the Israeli-American captive, Eden Alexander, emerging. So, if you can see here in your bottom left corner, we can see the Israeli-American hostage being handed over to the Red Cross and later to Israeli Defense Forces. So Hamas has officially handed over the Israeli-American hostage, Eden Alexander. And probably one of the biggest news that we've gotten today is coming from Donald Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia. So, Donald Trump arrived yesterday in the capital city of Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, as part of his Middle East tour. So he was accompanied by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and he welcomed the US President in the airport. This is Donald Trump's first foreign trip after being elected president for the second time. So Donald Trump officially met Saudi Arabian Prince Mohammed, and Saudi Arabia and America made some huge economic deals. Because Trump has officially, along with the Saudi Prince, signed the Strategic Economic Partnership with Saudi Arabia that also gives Donald Trump approximately $600 billion in investment. So the White House has secured $600 billion in its economic cooperation agreements with Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia will invest 600 billion US dollars in the United States in the next couple months and years. So interesting news. And along with Donald Trump and Saudi Arabia signing the Strategic Economic Partnership that includes $600 billion, the United States and Saudi Arabia also signed the largest defense sales agreement in history, so nearly $142 billion, providing Saudi Arabia with state-of-the-art warfighting equipment and services from over a dozen US defense firms. So not only $600 billion has been secured by Donald Trump also got a $142 billion defense contract with Saudi Arabia. And along with Donald Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump also lifted and promised to lift sanctions on Syria. Because if you can see here in the bottom left corner, Donald Trump actually met with the president of Syria, Ahmad al-Sharaa. So the US actually demanded from the Syrian president, Ahmad al-Sharaa, regarding the normalization of relations between Syria and the United States. But Donald Trump actually gave some demands to the Syrian president at his meeting with the Syrian president. So Donald Trump stated that in order for the United States to lift sanctions and normalize relations with Syria, Donald Trump actually came up with some demands that Syria must do before sanctions are lifted on Syria. So the US demanded that Syria joins the Abraham Accords with Israel. So basically that's the normalization of relations with Israel, a push on foreign terrorists and militants to leave Syria, the deportation of Palestinian terrorists and militant figures, and assist the United States in combating ISIS, and assume responsibility for ISIS detention centers in northern eastern Syria. So very big news. And furthermore, after Donald Trump finished his economic agreements in Saudi Arabia and his promising of sanction reliefs in Syria, Donald Trump headed to Qatar, where he signed even more economic agreements. So we can see here in the bottom left corner, we can see the US President Donald Trump. Donald Trump's plane land in Qatar following his visit to Saudi Arabia. And like Saudi Arabia's visit, he secured another economic agreement, but this one was huge. President Donald J. Trump secured an historic $1.2 trillion of economic commitment in Qatar. Today, in Qatar, President Donald J. Trump signed an agreement with Qatar to generate an economic exchange worth at least $1.2 trillion. President Donald Trump also announced economic deals with Qatar Airways. So Qatar Airways also signed a deal with Donald Trump and the United States for 160 Boeing jets worth $200 billion during Trump's visit. So the United States will be supplying Qatar with 160 Boeing jets for Qatar Airways. So very big news. And furthermore, after Donald Trump finished his visit to Qatar, Donald Trump departed from the Arab Kingdom after a very successful visit. Then, the US President went to the United Arab Emirates as he continues his historic Middle East trip. So, after Donald Trump left Qatari airspace, he was accompanied by the United Arab Emirates Air Force and was escorted by the Air Force of the United Arab Emirates. Then he landed in Abu Dhabi and met with the leaders of the United Arab Emirates. There, Donald Trump, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, signed numerous agreements, but Donald Trump has signed the biggest one so far, because the UAE and the United States will invest $1.4 trillion in the United States for the next 10 years, and Donald Trump has also secured $200 billion in worth of deals between the United Arab Emirates and the United States. So it seems that the United Arab Emirates has taken the official first place of investing in the United States. So to summarize Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East, it's been quite a success. So let's just go through it really quickly again. So Donald Trump secured a Qatar deal that the United States and Qatar signed a deal worth $1.2 trillion. Qatar will invest $10 billion in the US military facility and purchase $42 billion in US weapons. Qatar Airways will buy 210 Boeing jets worth $96 billion. Saudi Arabia has agreed to $600 billion in investments with Saudi government and firms. Another 145 deals were made worth $300 billion with investors, and a $142 billion in agreement for Saudis to buy military equipment from the United States. And then obviously the United Arab Emirates, where the United States and the UAE will invest $1.4 trillion in the United States for the next 10 years, and the UAE has also signed $200 billion in deals with the United States. And obviously Donald Trump has lifted up sanctions, has promised to lift all sanctions on Syria, and Trump has also asked American companies to invest in Syria's oil and gas sector. So very interesting news coming from Donald Trump's Middle East trip. And furthermore, the next news we've got today is coming from Somalia. So we've got news that Somalia has banned Taiwanese passport holders from entering the country. So this follows several official warnings from Taiwanese officials regarding their support for Somaliland. So this autonomous and separatist region here of Somalia. So Taiwan, on the other hand, claims that the decision was made under pressure from China. So from Somalia's perspective, because Taiwan was supporting or recognizing the independence of Somaliland, a separatist region of Somalia here, Somalia has completely banned Taiwanese passport holders from entering the country. And the next news event today is coming from the fourth round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran. So the fourth round of indirect US-Iranian talks held in the capital city of Oman has concluded after 3 hours. We were talking a little bit about this in yesterday's video, but the meeting has fully concluded, and according to Iran's foreign minister, the talks with Washington, so America, were more serious than previous rounds. The American and Iranian sides now have a better understanding of each other. Negotiations are moving forward and both sides have decided to continue negotiations. The next round of nuclear talks will likely take place next week, but no location has been added. So the fifth round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran will be happening next week, but during the fourth round of negotiations, apparently it went pretty smoothly. There was a bit of ups and downs between the negotiations between the United States and Iran, but according to Iran's foreign minister, now they have a better general perspective of of what sides wants what. And the next news we got today is coming from Taiwan. So we've got news today that Taiwan tests the HIMARS systems for the first time. So Taiwan has just conducted its first live fire test of the M142 HIMARS systems during the, I quote, thunder drills at the Zhuping military base. So this exact area here in Taiwan. So this test, missile test, was apparently simulating a major counter-strike against a Chinese naval landing force. So several rockets were launched out of the HIMARS tests at a range of 70 to 91 kilometers. So very interesting news. So Taiwan has just conducted its first ever live fire test of the HIMARS systems. Several rockets were fired, and they were, according to Taiwanese Ministry of Defense, they were simulating a possible counterattack on Chinese landing operations. And furthermore, the last news we got today is coming from the United States, and more specifically coming from the White House. So we've just got news that the White House announces a major trade deal with China. So China is apparently going to be lowering tariffs on US goods to 10% from 125% for 90 days, and the US will cut tariffs on Chinese goods to 30% from 145% for 90 days in return. So remember in yesterday's video we talked about how there was a major Chinese and US economic talks in Geneva, Switzerland, and the Americans and the Chinese governments have finally reached a deal on a tariff agreement. So China will be lowering tariffs on US goods to 10% from 125%, again for 90 days, and the US will do the same, but to 30%, sorry, from 145%, again from 90 days. And that's all the news I actually have for you today. I am Non-Seen News. I'll try and provide you news that medias around the world do not show you. I do these videos hopefully daily, so consider subscribing and liking. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye.